man clocks in wearing brown, looking like he belongs on every quiet street in America. A uniform, a box, a normal day. But behind that clean look is a whole different lane, one where the plan is tight, the timing is sharper, and the goal is simple. Get inside, get paid, get out. The scary part is how smooth it looks at first. Like nothing is wrong. No masks, no kicking doors, just a disguise that makes people drop their guard for 1 second. And in this game, 1 second is enough to change everything. Because once a crew learns they can move like that, the line between smart and sick gets real thin, real fast. But what actually happened when that UPS look turned into a hit squad play? Alonzo Pierre Mingo was born on July 22, 1986. The story starts in Chicago, Illinois, and the way his background later gets described in court is not gentle. A childhood with extreme violence, not just scuffles, but actual violence that resulted in death and substantial injury. The biggest trauma that keeps getting brought up is his brother. When Mingo is still young, he watches his brother die from severe injuries. That kind of loss can harden somebody early. Like the streets stamp it into you. That is how his defense later frames it too. They say this moment changes him and pushes him into street life activity early. In gang terms, it is the start of that mindset where you feel like you have to move different just to survive. This matters because when Mingo later pops up in a major case, people act like it comes out of nowhere. But the timeline does not appear overnight. It builds. And with Mingo, the build starts in Chicago with grief, fear, and early exposure that sticks, and it leads straight into the family story the judge locks onto later. What makes this background messy is the contrast. Mingo carries an extensive record, mainly from Illinois, with at least 5 felony convictions between 2006 and 2017. It includes an aggravated battery conviction and 2 weapons-related convictions. In 2015, one of his most serious Illinois cases hits. He was arrested for attempted murder and aggravated battery involving the discharge of a firearm. He goes to jail for the aggravated battery charge, later gets released on parole, and then violates parole in 2018 while in Minnesota. In street terms, it reads like the cycle never fully stops. The record becomes the foundation, the parole becomes the pressure point, and the shift from Chicago to Minnesota becomes the next move, because the next major incident unfolds far from where the story starts. A little after 9 p.m. on October 26, 2018, St. Paul police receive a 911 call. The caller says he sees 2 men with guns in the alley behind a BP gas station on Lexington Parkway. The caller also mentions a gray Buick with tinted windows, though the link between the men and the car is not fully clear. The officers involved include Ku Yang, John Kajakub, and Evan Kowalski. Kajakub and Kowalski roll in a marked squad car and check the alley. They do not find the 2 men described or any weapons, though they run into a man dressed in black. Yang is in uniform but in an unmarked car, and he sets up surveillance in front of the gas station. Yang sees a gray Buick LaCrosse with tinted windows already sitting at a pump next to a black Nissan. 2 men stand behind the vehicles. It is nighttime and it is raining, but the canopy lights brighten the area. Yang watches cars pull up and interact with those men. He uses binoculars, runs the plate on the Nissan, and sees it is registered to Tyrese Reed. Yang recognizes Reed from prior drug and weapon investigations and identifies him as one of the men on scene. The other man later gets identified as Mingo, tied to the Buick. Yang keeps watch for around 2 hours. He sees people walk up or pull up, and from a distance it looks like handshake-style exchanges. Based on his experience, Yang reads it as hand-to-hand drug dealing. He also does not see either man pump gas or go inside. After that long watch, he decides it is time to move in, and that is when the calm front turns into instant chaos. When officers move in, Kowalski and Kajakub reach Reed and Mingo first, and Yang arrives seconds later. Both men start out talking with officers behind the Nissan. Kajakub begins patting down Reed. At that moment, Mingo begins walking around the driver's side of the Nissan toward the front. Other officers approach from the gas station side. Kowalski looks into the Buick and asks who it belongs to. Mingo gestures and says it is his. Mingo circles around the front of the Nissan toward the driver's side door of the Buick. As he reaches for the door handle, Kowalski tells him hold on and gestures for him to stop. Now Mingo is stuck between the 2 cars with an officer on either side. Officer Dean directs him to come here for a second and asks if he has anything on him. Mingo starts moving past Kowalski. Dean walks up behind him and grabs at the bottom of Mingo's coat, saying he wants to see if Mingo has anything on him. Dean takes Mingo's left arm and begins patting down the outside of the coat. That is the moment the encounter breaks. Mingo actively breaks free and stumbles forward. It turns chaotic fast. One officer tries to grab him. Mingo pushes him away and heads toward the street. Yang tries to grab him too. Mingo breaks away again and falls. An officer orders him to stop. Mingo tries to get back up. Yang pushes him while another officer fires a taser. Mingo goes down. Officers roll him over, put him in handcuffs, and Yang later testifies that at that point he considers Mingo under arrest. Once the cuffs go on, the search starts, and everything pivots on what officers pull from his pocket. After Mingo is in handcuffs, Kowalski searches his pockets and unzips his jacket. As officers stand him up, another officer finds a handgun in Mingo's right jacket pocket. Mingo later seeks to suppress that gun, arguing it comes from an unlawful stop and search. The government does not claim any part of the encounter as voluntary, so the court treats both the stop and the search as Fourth Amendment issues. The analysis breaks into two parts: the seizure and the search. On the seizure side, the magistrate judge says officers have reasonable suspicion based on the full picture. The 911 call, the gas station being watched due to increased drug and weapons activity, the gray Buick detail, Reed's background, the 2-hour stay at the pumps, the lack of normal gas station behavior, and Yang reading those handshake-style interactions as drug exchanges based on experience. The report rejects picking each fact apart one by one. On the search side, the report says that even if the initial stop is improper, the handgun still is not suppressed because Mingo's response creates independent grounds for arrest. Once he breaks away and tries to flee, officers have probable cause under Minnesota law to arrest him. After that lawful arrest, they can search him fully. That is when the handgun gets found. The recommendation is clear: deny the suppression motion. In simple terms, the gun stays in evidence, and with his felony history, that gun keeps him in a serious federal lane, and the system starts tightening from there. Mingo fights the stop hard. The first evidentiary hearing happens on April 23, 2019, with Mingo represented by the federal defender. The court issues a report and recommendation denying suppression. Before objections are due, Mingo files a pro se motion requesting new counsel. The court grants it and appoints new counsel under the Criminal Justice Act. The court gives him more time to file objections. Through new counsel, Mingo claims he has evidence showing he is not at the gas station the entire time. Officer Yang places him there. He asks to reopen the hearing to add phone records and video. The district court grants it for the limited purpose of receiving that evidence, and the prior report gets vacated. After a continuance to allow subpoena and analysis, the limited suppression hearing happens on December 12, 2019. Mingo submits phone data and an affidavit from the forensic examiner who analyzes it. He also submits gas station security video. The new material does not place him elsewhere. The phone records show calls during the window, with the cell site data pointing to a tower near the BP. The video starts after he is already there and begins only about 10 minutes before officers move in. The report also notes that even though no drugs are recovered, the legal question is whether the officer reasonably suspects drug dealing at the time, not whether the stop later produces drugs. The supplemental evidence does not change the result. The recommendation stays the same, and that sets up the next step because the district judge still has to rule after objections. On March 31, 2020, the district judge conducts de novo review and accepts the magistrate judge's report and recommendation. The judge says Mingo's objections fall into 4 buckets: credibility attacks on Officer Yang, disputes about how events are described, challenges to reasonable suspicion, and arguments that Officer Dean lifting the jacket turns the stop into an arrest without probable cause. On credibility, the judge says Judge Schultz observed Yang and found him credible, and after review, the district judge agrees. The judge says not remembering whether it is raining or not remembering whether the 911 call mentions race does not destroy credibility. The judge also explains that trained law enforcement can see meaning in behavior that looks innocent to others. On reasonable suspicion, the judge looks at the total picture and says the officers have an objective, particularized basis to stop him. The judge points to Yang's testimony about the 2-hour presence at the pumps without pumping gas or going inside, and the observation of what appears to be hand-to-hand activity, plus knowledge of increased narcotics and weapons activity at that location. The judge says the lack of drugs or cash recovered later does not matter because the analysis does not use hindsight. On the jacket point, after reviewing body camera footage, the judge describes Officer Dean grabbing and pulling at the jacket while Mingo is not complying and does not view it as a full-on search under the coat. The order overrules the objections, accepts the report, and denies the motion to suppress. That locks the gun evidence into the case. Once that happens, the story is no longer about arguing the stop. It becomes about a prohibited person with a gun, and the timeline starts mixing federal procedure, parole issues, and custody moves. On January 8, 2019, An initial appearance and removal proceedings are held before Judge Weissman. Mingo appears in response to an arrest warrant issued out of the District of Minnesota. He is advised of his rights and the pending charges under Federal Rule of Criminal Procedure 5. The court finds he can understand his rights. Attorney Holly Blaine makes an oral motion to appear. It is granted, and the court appoints her under CJA. Mingo is advised of his right to an identity hearing, and he waives it. He is advised of his right under Rule 20 to resolve pending charges in the Northern District of Illinois. He does not contest removal at that time. The government makes an oral motion for removal in custody based on risk of flight and danger to the community, and the matter is continued. A detention hearing is set for January 11, 2019 at 2 p.m. The government is directed to confer with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota and advise the court on detention and potential appeal issues. The court remands Mingo into the custody of the U.S. Marshal. In the bigger picture, this shows the system treating him like someone who may run or cause harm, and it also shows Illinois is still part of the conversation in court. The background adds more custody movement around that same period, and it shows how Mingo keeps getting passed between systems like a hot file. Ramsey County retrieves Mingo from ICE custody to face a local gun charge, and his addresses are listed as both St. Paul and Chicago. The gun involved at the BP is described as a .40 caliber Glock stolen in Illinois, and it later gets forfeited in the federal case. He posts a $50,000 bond, but then he skips his required state court hearing, and that is where the situation turns unstable fast. After that, he ends up back in ICE custody in February 2019, and a Minnesota court document shows he is detained by ICE at Fort Snelling. The paperwork around ICE makes it even clearer how official and controlled this custody movement is. A court order is directed to the Department of Homeland Security, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, attention to the field office director at 1 Federal Drive in Fort Snelling, Minnesota. It lists the location as the Sherburne County Jail and commands ICE to produce ICE detainee Alonzo P. Mingo with an alien number listed into the custody of the Ramsey County Sheriff on or around March 28, 2019 at 1:20 p.m. The order spells it out like a relay. The Ramsey County Sheriff is set to pick him up from the ICE Fort Snelling office at 1 Federal Drive and bring him before the District Court of Ramsey County for the court matter. Then once the court is done for the day, the order commands that he be returned back into ICE custody and delivered to the ICE Fort Snelling office during business hours, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m., excluding weekends and holidays. Later, the state case is dismissed in February 2021, by which time he is in federal prison, and his time in ICE custody does not appear to result in deportation. The pattern is not stable. It is movement, missed court, and custody switching hands. And in court, that kind of movement matters because it feeds the argument that supervision and earlier punishments do not keep him from stepping back into the same kind of trouble. In November 2020, sentencing happens in federal court. The judge goes on the record. The government is represented by Emily Polachek. The defense is represented by Charles Klaus. The judge confirms review of the pre-sentence report, sentencing guidelines, position papers, letters, the plea agreement, and the information filed in the case. The judge confirms there are no objections to the facts or guideline calculations. Acceptance of responsibility is granted, and the guideline range is set at offense level 19 with criminal history category 5, producing a recommended imprisonment range of 57 to 71 months. The defense goes first and frames it as a straight possession case. The defense says there are no allegations of violent attempts with the firearm and no conspiracy to commit violence, describing it as nothing more, nothing less. The defense then leans into personal background, saying Mingo starts street life activity young, lives through extreme violence, and sees his brother die young, and that those experiences shape him. The defense also argues that some serious cases on paper paint him as more directly violent than the final conviction suggests, pointing out that initial charges do not always match the end result. Then the defense leans on family support, saying his kids are there, family travels to support him, and he plans to live with his brother who is described as a productive member of society. The government responds with a harder angle. They say it is a possession case, but there is more to it. The government says he is on parole less than a year at the time. He is on parole for aggravated battery involving a shooting. He is in Minnesota in violation of parole conditions, and he possesses a gun in violation of those conditions. They also add how this is his third conviction for being a felon in possession of a firearm and say earlier prison terms do not deter him, meaning they are still here in court again. That is the clash, one side selling change, the other side pointing at the pattern, and it builds straight into the moment where he speaks directly to the judge. When it is his turn, Mingo apologized to his family for traveling to Minnesota to support him. The judge asks if they travel from Mississippi, and the answer is yes, and the judge also mentions family coming from Illinois. Mingo says the people with him are my children, my brother and sister, and the mother of my children. As the judge sorts out who is present, Mingo says Carol is there, and Yolanda is still in Atlanta. The defense also points out he has a sister who took an educated path and says his brother is a productive member of society and offers him a place to live when he gets out. So it is not a no support situation. Support is right there in the room watching him. Mingo tells them this will be the last time they ever feel the need to stand beside him in a criminal matter. He apologizes to his children, AJ and Elijah, and promises he will not leave them again. He apologizes to the court for possessing a firearm and says it reflects his stupidity and fear. He says he will never pick up another firearm again because it is not worth the heartache or the distance it puts between him and his family. He is done with that lifestyle and uses the line that sticks. He says he is not just a product of his environment, he is a product of change. The judge then clarifies family details and explains sentencing is guided by the law. The judge says she is struck by his family's story and points to the examples she sees as proof that late change can happen, including Mingo's grandmother going to college after age 50, which she calls amazing, and his mother being from Mississippi and returning to school as an adult to provide for her kids. The judge tells him he can turn it around and says he is lucky to be alive. The judge talks to his kids about school and college and tells them their mom will help them through anger so it does not turn into something worse. The judge tells Mingo strength is not a gun. Strength is resisting that lifestyle. The judge says she does not see a variance because mitigating and aggravating factors balance out, but she sentences him at the bottom of the guideline range because she has faith he can change. She encourages counseling and says trauma affects mental health and getting help is strength. Then she formally imposes the sentence: 57 months in custody and supervised release conditions, including no firearms. The hearing ends with the judge telling him she has taken an interest and wants to hear from him when he gets out. And that is what makes this part of the timeline feel heavy, because it sets up the 2024 case, and it leaves a hard question hanging in the air about what happens when somebody promises never again. But the street pool is still right there waiting. In February 2023, Alonzo Pierre Mingo is back outside on supervised release, and the streets already know what that means. He is not fully free, he is on a leash, and one wrong move can send him right back. After he gets out in 2023, he starts working at UPS, trying to look like he is moving in a straight lane. But even with that job, he does not fully leave street activity behind, and after being out for a short time, he slides back into the drug game. It is that double life setup. 1 foot in the uniform, 1 foot in the mix, like he is trying to play both sides. And once he is back in that world, it is only a matter of time before he crosses paths with the wrong people, because the game is small and the circles overlap. This is where Mario Estrada comes into the picture, and the documents make it clear this is not some random name. Mario already has prior drug convictions, including one in Wisconsin for intent to sell cocaine and one in Minnesota for 5th-degree drugs. Now the question turns sharp. When Mingo steps back into that lane, is he stepping into a quick money move or stepping into something that has eyes on it already? In the fall of 2023, Mario Estrada is already on authorities' radar for suspected drug trafficking, and that matters because it changes the whole energy around everyone connected to him. In October 2023, Minnesota Ramsey County Violent Crime Enforcement obtains a warrant and places Mario under surveillance. From that point, the months-long investigation is not just talk, it is movement and tracking. Detectives follow him around the Twin Cities and start building a case the slow way, day after day, watching patterns and routines. Court documents describe detectives finding evidence that Mario and his wife, Shannon Youngworth, who is also referred to as Shannon Youngworth, are sending money to Mexico. That detail lands heavy because it tells you law enforcement believes this is not small-time chaos. It reads like a pipeline, like money is moving out, and people are watching where it goes. And when a person is under that kind of attention, the people around them become part of the picture too, whether they like it or not. That is how street problems turn into task force problems. That is how a money move turns into a we are watching everything situation. And it sets the stage for something darker, because when pressure builds around suspected trafficking, it can pull in people who think they are just doing a lick, but the scene they walk into is already loaded. Now the timeline hits Friday, January 26, 2024, and everything speeds up. A pole camera is already mounted across the street from a single-family home at 212 94th Avenue NW, Coon Rapids, Anoka County, Minnesota. And that camera captures a navy blue Nissan Altima with Minnesota plates, KBP 678, pulling up at 12:21 p.m. 3 suspects exit the vehicle and approach the house. 2 are wearing clothing similar to UPS delivery driver uniforms. and one is carrying a cardboard box like he is dropping off a package. It is a disguise that lets them walk right up without setting off the neighborhood alarm, because delivery drivers are background noise. The registered owner of that Altima is Alonzo Pierre Mingo, and that ties the whole pull-up to him. This is not a random car. This is his ride. The pole camera then captures the suspects entering the home, and the entire play is moving fast, clean, and bold in broad daylight. By 12:28 p.m., the same camera captures all three exiting and leaving in that same vehicle. That is only minutes. That is not a long standoff. That is a quick in and out, like a crew running a planned hit or a planned robbery, and the only question is what is happening inside those walls during those minutes. At approximately 12:24 p.m. on January 26, 2024, Coon Rapids police are dispatched after receiving an emergency call to that same residence. The 911 call captures a female in the background of what sounds like a possible domestic situation. When officers arrive, the scene is already dead quiet in the worst way. They find a deceased adult male in the doorway with at least one apparent gunshot wound to the head. They also observe a broken firearm magazine and several loose rounds of ammunition on the floor near his body. As they enter further, they find a second deceased adult male in an office area, also with an apparent gunshot wound to the head. In a bedroom, they find a deceased adult female with an apparent gunshot wound to the head. Two small children, both under the age of 5, are present and not harmed. Officers also notice several surveillance cameras mounted throughout the house, including a wireless camera near the deceased female, which becomes a key part of what law enforcement later reviews. No firearms are located inside the residence. The victims are identified as Shannon Patricia Youngworth, 42, her husband Mario Alberto Trejo Estrada, 39, and her son Jorge Alexander Reyes Youngworth, 20. And this is where the case turns extra chilling, because it is not just what happened, it is what the cameras inside that home capture next. Surveillance audio and video from the bedroom camera captures the adult female along with both children inside. Then Mingo enters the bedroom wearing a UPS uniform, along with another male who appears to be one of the later deceased males. Mingo is holding both the male and female at gunpoint and demanding money. The footage captures Mingo and the two adults leaving the bedroom, and the children follow. Then the video captures Mingo and the female returning to the bedroom, and Mingo shoots her in the head at point-blank range near the entryway. What happens next is hard to shake. The older child can be seen entering the bedroom shortly thereafter, crying hysterically. Another subsequent video shows the younger child entering the bedroom to check on the female until the older child pulls the younger child away from the deceased female's body and out of the room. It is a brutal detail, and it makes the disguise feel even colder because the uniform is not just a costume. It becomes the cover for a crew walking into a family home, taking control and letting violence play out on camera while little kids are right there. Police do not note in the probable cause statement whether any money or valuables are missing, and the criminal complaint makes no mention of charges against the other two suspects at that point. But the video shows enough to put Mingo at the center. The next question becomes simple and heavy. How fast does law enforcement lock onto him once that car and those cameras point in one direction? Shortly after law enforcement responds to the Coon Rapids address, a call-up alert is issued on Mingo's vehicle, and now it is a hunt. On January 26, 2024, at 3:14 p.m., Mingo is observed leaving his residence and driving away in the same vehicle captured on the pole camera. The vehicle is stopped 5 minutes later at 73rd Avenue NE, near Baker Road in Fridley, Anoka County, Minnesota, and Mingo was arrested. His vehicle is towed. During the stop, law enforcement later learns he throws his cell phone out of the window while being pulled over. The cell phone is located and collected. In a post-Miranda statement, Mingo later told police he has never worked at UPS, he does not own a cell phone, and he is at his residence all day. A subsequent search of his vehicle reveals a backpack, and inside detectives locate UPS delivery uniform tops and a UPS vest. Police later confirm he is employed by UPS until early January of 2024, and a UPS spokesperson confirms he works for the company for a short time as a seasonal employee with temporary employment ending in mid-January. It is a fast collapse of his version of events because the uniform is there, the car is his, and the case is now about what the cameras show and what the physical evidence supports. And then the phone detail lands like another stamp on the timeline. The cell phone Mingo throws from his vehicle has a key detail tied to it. It has been turned off on January 26, 2024 at 10 a.m. and stays off until 12:39 p.m. that same day. Law enforcement also conducts further interviews and learns that on January 26, 2024, Mingo leaves his residence at approximately 10 a.m. His vehicle has a Mr. Car Wash barcode on the front windshield. and Mr. Car Wash records show that on January 26, 2024 at 2:40 p.m., his account is used at the Mr. Car Wash on County Road B, 2 and Snelling Avenue in Roseville, Minnesota. Surveillance video is reviewed and shows the defendant's vehicle going through the car wash at that date and time. Fingerprints are also located on the cardboard box carried into the home and left at the residence, and they are analyzed at the Midwest Regional Forensic Laboratory and confirmed to match Mingo. This is not one single piece. It is the phone window, the car activity, the uniform, and the fingerprints all lining up into a timeline that is hard to wiggle out of. And that is why prosecutors start signaling early that this is not just another case on the calendar. They are looking at the footage, the children being present, and the way the victims are treated. The next move is court, and the bond number alone tells you how serious the system treats it. In late January 2024, Mingo faces 3 counts of second-degree murder, according to a criminal complaint filed in Anoka County Court. The complaint lists the offense date, and it states the charge description in each count as causing the death of a human being with intent to effect death without premeditation, and that at the time of the offense, the defendant or an accomplice uses or possesses a firearm, identified as a handgun. He is held in the county jail in lieu of $5 million bail, and he does not enter a plea during that early hearing. Online court records do not list an attorney, and he is denied a public defender, with the presiding judge denying his request. A prosecutor notifies the judge they intend to ask for a sentence above the normal guidelines if he is convicted, stating, "The victims were treated with particular cruelty for which the defendant should be held responsible." The probable cause statement also keeps the focus on the 2 children being present in the home. It is not just the killings, it is the setting, the disguise, the timing, and the fact the violence is captured on camera inside a family house. Mingo's second court appearance is then scheduled for February 8th, and at this point the public picture still has a missing piece because the poll camera shows 3 suspects and the home footage shows more than one person moving through the scene. That is the part that hangs. Who are the other 2, and when do they get named? As the investigation keeps moving, the case stops looking like a one-man play and starts looking like a crew operation. In February 2024, Anoka County officials announced that 19-year-old Omari Shumpert and 31-year-old Demetrius Shumpert, both of Minneapolis, are in custody and charged in connection to the January 26 killings. They each face 3 felony counts of second-degree murder, and Mingo already faces the same charges. The charges say surveillance video from the residence shows Omari Shumpert hitting a male victim with a pistol before fatally shooting him when he fights back. Officials also say DNA evidence and phone records aid in identifying Omari Shumpert and Demetrius Shumpert as the other 2 suspects. Then in the coming months, the case escalates again. Mingo is indicted on first-degree murder charges in early April, and that is a major shift because first degree is the top shelf in Minnesota. Not long after that, in mid-April 2024, the other 2 men tied to this home invasion, Omari Shumpert and Demetrius Shumpert, are indicted by a grand jury on 6 counts of first-degree murder. By May 2024, all 3 suspects in the Coon Rapids triple homicide now face first-degree murder charges. The state is basically saying this is not a random situation that gets out of hand. They are treating it like an execution-style play that starts as a money move and ends in a triple homicide. Court documents also reveal that drugs may have played a role, and that one of the victims killed is being investigated by a violent crime task force for selling illegal drugs. That detail pulls the story right back to the street lane. It raises the same question the paperwork keeps circling. Is this a robbery for drug money, a pressure hit tied to trafficking, or something else inside that home that turns deadly in minutes? Even before the trials start rolling, the documents keep hinting at why this house gets picked. Court records say drugs could have played a role, and that one of the victims is being investigated by a violent crime task force for selling illegal drugs. That does not prove every detail by itself, but it explains the lane prosecutors keep pushing. They are not painting this as a random, wrong house situation. They are painting it like a targeted money play, like the kind of lit crews think is safe because it is not a civilian bag, it is drug money. That is also why the words on the 911 recording hit different. Prosecutors say jurors hear parts of a call where a man is yelling, "Where's the money?" And that one line tells you what kind of time this is, not a rumors, not internet talk, just a straight demand that turns deadly. Jump to September 2nd, 2025, and the courtroom is where it gets sealed up. A jury convicts Alonzo Mingo on a stack of counts, including 4 counts of first-degree murder, plus aiding and abetting counts, plus second-degree murder counts. He is found not guilty of one aiding and abetting first-degree count, but the rest of that verdict is heavy, and the footage is a big reason this does not stay "he said, she said." That is the part people cannot shake because it is not just words on paper. It is real movement on camera. It is the robbery posture. It is the gun out. It is the money demand. And then it is the shot that ends a life in a bedroom. On September 11th, 2025, the sentence comes down like a door slamming. Mingo is sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the Coon Rapids triple homicide. That means there is no do your time and come home. The court is saying this ends in prison. The case is already known for that UPS disguise angle, for the way the crew uses delivery driver clothing and a cardboard box to get access. But sentencing day is where the story turns into an official ending for him. The state treats him like the primary gunman, and that life sentence matches that. In street terms, this is the system saying that play is dead. But the case is not finished overall because the Shumpert brothers are still sitting in the mix. And that is where the timeline keeps moving because the court still has to sort out who did what and who is getting hit with what time. The basic scene details stay consistent across the court record summaries. A home invasion that leaves 3 bodies and 2 little kids alive. In the middle of it, the courts keep circling the same ugly truth. This is a money play that turns into a kill scene, and the kids are not somewhere else. They are right there, and that is one of the darkest parts of the whole file. By November 2025, Demetrius Shumpert is in trial mode. Opening statements start, and prosecutors tell jurors they believe the attack is motivated by a plan to steal cash connected to suspected drug activity, and they say investigators believe Trejo Estrada is under investigation for alleged narcotics trafficking. Demetrius's defense says he is innocent and wrongly accused, and the defense claims the state's case is circumstantial and based more on association than direct physical evidence tying him to the shootings. So the courtroom turns into a tug-of-war. Prosecutors lean on the crew story and the evidence trail. Defense leans on prove it. And with Mingo already convicted, the tension is obvious. The state is trying to lock the whole squad down. Later in November 2025, a jury convicts Demetrius Shumpert on multiple counts of first-degree murder, and he is scheduled to be sentenced in January 2026. That conviction matters because it backs the state's position that this is not just Mingo acting alone. It supports the idea that the home invasion is a 3-man play, and each person is held responsible for what happens inside that house. The case is already known as disturbing, but when another jury comes back guilty, it turns that shock into a pattern of accountability. One by one, the court is putting names next to the violence and turning that into life sentences. Then December 12th, 2025 comes, and Omari Malik Shumpert is the one in the hot seat. He faces 11 counts, and the jury finds him guilty of 10 of those counts. The jury finds him not guilty of 1 count of premeditated first-degree murder. This verdict is described as following 2 earlier guilty verdicts, which lines up with Mingo being convicted and sentenced in September 2025, and Demetrius being convicted in November 2025. So by this point, the case feels like it is closing in, not in a soft way, but in a locked doorway. The court is building a wall around the entire crew. By December 13th, 2025, it is about what investigators say backs Omari's conviction. Reports say surveillance video from inside the home shows the Shumpert brothers pistol whipping one of the men before one of the brothers shoots him. Investigators test loose rounds of ammunition found in the home, and DNA is linked to Omari. Cell phone data records place Omari, Demetrius, and Mingo at Demetrius' home the morning the victims are found. Omari, like his brother, is scheduled to be sentenced in January 2026. At this point, the evidence picture looks layered. Outside the courtroom, the impact is loud. The killings shock the Coon Rapids community, a quiet suburban area north of Minneapolis, and people start talking about public safety and the idea of criminals using delivery worker disguises to get inside homes. Authorities urge residents to verify unannounced visitors and call police if something seems off. Family members identify the victims as Shannon Patricia Trejo and her husband Mario Trejo, along with Shannon's 20-year-old son, Jorge Reyes Jungwirth. Family members say a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old are inside the home at the time of the murders, and the boys are reunited with family on Sunday. Shannon's sister, Kelly Jungwirth, says she has not slept since learning what happened and says details still feel sketchy, like she is holding her breath waiting for answers. That is the real damage. Not just headlines, but families living with the aftermath. The community reaction also turns into debate online because people see multiple intruders and start talking like it is a trend. One person posts, "This just supports the trend that a growing number of home invasions consist of multiple, often armed, intruders." Then they go further and say, "This is why we need AR-15 honestly," while also adding, "Probably the first line defense is to not sell drugs." Another person answers back with a different angle, saying they are all for owning ARs, but that is not the reason, and they talk about home defense being a pistol instead. This matters for the story because it shows what people hear when they hear UPS disguise. and home invasion. They do not just hear a crime, they hear a threat that feels like it could touch anyone, and then they argue about how to respond. And in the middle of all that noise, the court is still moving toward the final sentencings. Demetrius is scheduled to be sentenced on January 8th, 2026, and Omari is scheduled to be sentenced on January 9th, 2026. But as of January 10th, 2026, there are no clear public updates confirming the exact outcome or whether it proceeds exactly as scheduled, possibly due to limited media coverage or a delay. So the court picture looks like it is finished, but the public news picture looks quieter than expected. And that leaves the story in a tense spot because the crew is already convicted, but people still watch for the final paperwork to fully match the calendar. By January 13th, 2026, the quiet part turns official. Omari Shumpert and Demetrius Shumpert both get sentenced to life in prison for their role in the Coon Rapids triple homicide from 2 years earlier. They were both found guilty late last year, and the sentence makes it clear there is no way back out. Neither one is eligible for parole. Omari receives 3 life sentences for the murders. Demetrius Trenton Shumpert, 33, also receives 3 life sentences. Prosecutors say Mingo fatally shot Youngworth and Reyes Youngworth, while Omari killed Trejo Estrada after he fought back. And the wild part is this: after all the waiting and court dates, the whole crew is now sitting on life. So the only question left is what the full story shows about how this hit really comes together. The crew is not a crew anymore. It is a closed file with real names on it, real bodies behind it, and real life terms that do not bend. And that is the part people miss when they only talk about the disguise. The UPS fit is not the whole play. It is just the key that gets them through the door. After that, everything inside that house moves fast, cold, and on purpose. The kind of move where the clock matters, the roles matter, and one wrong second can turn a money play into a forever case. But the grimiest part is this: the same system that heard promises in a courtroom, the same system that watched a man say he is a product of change, still ends up watching this case explode into something way darker. So now the real tension is not only who gets life, it is how the road even leads here in the first place, and what that says about the way these crews think when they believe a uniform can make them invisible. And we are not done, because even with convictions and life sentences, the questions around motive, planning, and who really calls the shots still sit heavy in the air. So let us ask it straight. If a crew can walk into a home using a delivery disguise, what does that say about how safe normal feels now? When a robbery turns execution style in minutes, is it still a money play, or is it something else from the jump? Do you believe the camera footage is what breaks this case open, or does the crew leave other mistakes that seal their fate anyway? And the biggest one, when somebody promises to change, what does it mean when the streets pull them right back into the same lane? Let us know what you think in the comments box below. And if you liked how we presented you this video, hit that like button and make sure to subscribe for more.